Thank you, everybody. This is one of our first workshops back, coming back after the month break. So I'm going to hand over to Nomai, Sherilyn and Ella, and we have an hour and a half dedicated to this workshop today.
Kia ora, councillors, and thank you very much for being here today. I'm Sherilyn, and I'm just going to do a little brief intro before Ella takes the stage. So we're really excited to speak to you today about the Coastal Reserves Management Plan. This is an important plan that's prepared by the Council under the Reserves Act, and it sets out a management framework for our Wellington City coastal reserves and beach areas. It is similar in nature to our other reserve management plans, like the Outer Greenbelt Management Plan. However, it is also quite special. Our coast and the many coastal reserves and beaches that fall under this management plan are much loved by Wellingtonians, whether they live next to them or visit them. There are a lot of voices and a lot of different views to consider. Our coastal areas also have a big influence on the character of our city and suburbs. It's also quite a complex piece of reserves planning work. So it involves thinking about a range of issues, challenges and opportunities facing our coastal land areas. This includes how people use and value public coastal areas, includes recreation uses and activities, mana whenua values and aspirations, the impact of climate change and storms, and the interface of our coastal reserve land and beaches with things like transport and infrastructure. Ella Hardy, who you hopefully all know, our Senior Reserves Planner, is going to take us through this piece of work in a bit more detail, explaining what a reserves management plan is, why we need one, and what the process is for developing one. She also highlights the partnership approach we are taking with our Takahiri partners, and will take us through the feedback that we've received from the community and stakeholders so far in the process. One of the key purposes of today is to get your thoughts and directions on how to shape up this draft plan. So we also have a couple of workshop activities for you a bit later on to dive into. So that's all I want to say, and I'll hand over to Ella.
Kia ora. All right, so today, as Sherilyn said, the purpose of the workshop is to get your direction in shaping the development of this management plan. And we have 6 things on our agenda. The first thing is a bit more of explain what coastal reserve management plans are, what this one is, why, what, how. Then we'll discuss the public engagement and the key feedback themes that we had a big engagement process in June and July, and we'll talk about that. And then we've got a workshop activity, which is a carousel on those key themes, and I'll be keen to get you guys feedback on what the public said. And then we'll dive into specific coastal locations, and the second workshop will look at the opportunities and threats on a map, and look at what, thinking about the specific opportunities in specific areas. Then we'll wrap up and do next steps. So that's the plan. There'll be questions, but there'll be time for questions after each section. Cool. All right, so why is this review needed now? First of all, this is the current South Coast Management Plan that I'm holding up here. We have a statutory obligation to review this plan. It's well overdue. It's more than 23 years old now, and the coast is a very dynamic and changing environment. So there's lots of things, threats and issues on our coast that we need to consider, things like biosecurity, climate change, a million other things. There's also a lot of opportunities and strengths of the coast for this management plan to consider, things like, I'm used to having my slides in front of me.
Oh, yeah.
And but yes, things like people love our coast, and things like public access and caring for our environment and caring for our penguins. There's a million things that people want us to look at. The other key aspect of why we need to do this review is that this South Coast Management Plan only covers the South Coast, and there's a whole bunch of coastal areas that don't have a management plan approach. So we're looking at, through this plan, having a more integrated and consistent way for how we manage our coastal areas. So what is a reserve management plan? A reserve management plan establishes the desired mix of values and uses for reserve land. It says, how will we use this land? How will we enjoy it? What kind of protection maintenance will we have for the space? It guides day-to-day decision making. What's allowed on this space? What's not allowed? It sets out the vision, the objectives, the policy and the rules for the long-term management. And it's a plan for the development and enhancement of these spaces. It's a guide to all people and organisations. And for this plan, it's also not just about our reserves, it's for our coastal areas that are public land but reserve in nature, so some of our coastal road reserve areas. So the sections of a management plan, just to give you a bit of idea, is it has a bit of context, it has general objectives, policies, it has the management sectors, so that's specific areas on the coast that will look at specific policies and plans for those areas. It will have rules of use and development, that's what's allowed, managed, prohibited, and it will have an implementation plan. And this diagram here talks about where the management plan fits within our broader planning, legislative and council landscape. And the key thing here is that it's responding to the Reserves Act. It's a Reserves Act policy, but it's also really key part of connecting to our Te Whai o Rangapōneke, our open space and rec strategy, and delivering on some of those outcomes there, through to Piki Ora as well, and all these other key coastal management plans that are around from other organisations like Greater Wellington Regional Council we need to consider in there. So this is the draft scope, the extent of the land that we're looking at for the management plan. It's everywhere from Korori Stream around to Oriental Bay. That's the purple area to Kopaho. We're talking about the Southern Bays, talking about Lyle Bay, the Rangitato, Takiwa, Orawiti Reserve is possibly included in the scope. We're working with Taranaki Whānui about that. They own that land now as part of the Treaty Settlement Agreement. The Eastern Bays, the Matai, Moana, Takiwa, and the Akutangi area, and then Oriental Bay are all urban areas of coastal parts that Wellington City Council manages. Yeah, so just a little bit more about the type of land that will be is included in the scope of this plan. We are talking about the coastal marine area, that's the area below mean high water spring area, but only to the extent that council has assets in the area. So that's things like wharves and jetties. The rest of that area is managed by Greater Wellington Regional Council, and so there's a really important relationship and connection that we have with Greater Wellington there. We are looking at the coastal interface zone, Zone B, that's everywhere between the road and the mean high water spring. That's pretty much the all of this land in that area is covered in the scope where it's public land. And then we're looking at the coastal context, which is everywhere from the road above to the escarpment edges. This area is only in scope where it's a park and reserve. So we're talking about places like Shoreland Park Reserve and Rangitato Reserve that are the big escarpment hills on our coast. So this slide just talks about kind of the different areas of ideas and scope of the management plan, and it kind of throw in all the crazy things we need to consider. Things like climate change adaptation, access and connections, recreation, facilities and structure, nature, the design considerations. There's a bunch of place-specific issues, and Māori culture and mana whenua aspirations. And that we'll go more into those issues soon. So just to kind of say what's in scope: environmental outcomes and protection, recreational outcomes and access, cultural heritage, climate adaptation for parks, coastal road and road reserve, excluding the carriageway, reserves with coastal character are in scope, the recreational assets below mean high water spring that we own, and the important connections with assets and the impacts on beaches like our stormwater outlets. What's out of scope is residential retreat, and this is not our adaptation plan. That's happening here separately. We've got Jamuna here helping answer some questions. We're working with our adaptation team on it. We have a really important connection to it, but it is not the adaptation plan. There's rules in the coastal marine area out of scope because that's managed by Greater Wellington Regional Council. It's not our public transport or transport plan. It's also Wellington Waterfront's out of scope. It's not. We can't talk about extending the Marine Reserve because that's managed by Department of Conservation. And Watts Peninsula Crown land is out of scope, but it's a really important connection, and same with private land is out of scope. So, just quickly, this is a slide talking about our mana whenua partnership approach, and we're taking a new approach to how we've done management plans in the past, consistent with Te Whaioranga and our taka here. We have mana whenua representation on our project steering group from both Ngāti Toa and Taranaki Wānui on this project, and they are both working to develop cultural value assessments, which is outlining aspirations for these areas. They're holding a number of wānanga events for us, and we've done our first one with each iwi, and we're Taranaki Wānui representatives helped us co-design some of the engagement events that we had in July. And we're also working to co-design, they're also helping us work to co-design elements of the plan, and it's a work in progress, but we're trying our best to do a good partnership approach on this. And the other thing is we're also thinking about our regional partners. As the coastal area has got complex statutory responsibilities in this space, we're working closely with planners and scientists from the Greater Wellington Regional Council as we progress the plan development and considering their plans and ideas, incorporating them as relevant. So this is our kind of draft project timeframe, and this is where we're at. We've had our beachside chats engagement events. We did a little briefing with ward councillors in April, and we've had a public engagement, and I'll talk much more about that public engagement coming up. We're in the big yellow one, councillor setting directions for the plan. Then we're going to move to developing a draft that takes into account this direction, the culture value assessments, the engagement feedback, some environmental analysis mapping and coastal hazard mapping we're doing, and other research and putting to create a draft. Then we're hoping to bring a draft plan to councillors in March 2025, and then we'll consult on that and edit that and hopefully have a final plan mid to late 2025. That's the plan. It's complicated, so things might change. But what's really key is we're following the reserve management plan process that we have to follow under the Reserves Act. So just to sum up before we move to the next section, what makes this plan special is that Wellington is a coastal city, and the coast is part of our identity, a destination for everyone that people love. It's accessible, it's free, it's ours. But so this is not just a management plan for parks, but it's an integrated coastal approach that we're managing with cross-council involvement, and will include climate change, transport and infrastructure in developing this plan. It's also got multi-agency considerations, which makes it even more complex with Greater Wellington Regional Council, DOC, fisheries and more. And we're working closely with mana whenua to support a partnership approach. And another really thing that makes this plan complex and special is the considerations that we need to do around climate adaptation. So, so now I just wanted to open up for a few pātai, and up next I'll talk about the public engagement feedback.
Cool. We have a few on the list. Deputy Murphin.
Yeah, just a questions around. Inevitably, these plans accrue costs along the way, and what is the process to make sure if there are costs needed to be put into our budgets to act on the plan? What is the process to make sure that that will happen?
Do you want to answer? Are you open to it? Yeah. So as we develop the plan, we need to consider the costs, but ultimately it'll be through the annual plan process that we'll have to put through if decisions are made that impact recommendations through.
Great, okay. Yeah. And just around Kaiwhara Stream, that wasn't on the map. Is there a reason for that?
So at the moment we're not planning to include Kaiwhara Stream because it's owned by, the area down the coast is owned by Kiwi Rail, so it's not council land.
Cool. Yeah. And just some, I mean, I guess this will come out, but there's some pollution issues regarding landfill and ex-landfill that are going straight into Taputeranga. So, I'm just a bit concerned about how we walk that line, because no matter what we're doing with funding, we can't seem to get it to clean that up. So it just feels like we're, talking about things that we're not doing sometimes not doing anything about. So I'm just raising that now, and I'll keep leaning into that through the process.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Chung.
Thanks. You talk about, in one of those boxes back there, about privately owned land.
Yep.
So are you referring to Kiwi Rail, or are there other private owners?
There's a few spaces on the coast where there's private land, like next to in Lyle Bay. There's a little corner. There's also the airport. Airport land. There's and there's some land by Miramar as well. So there's
I
a
see.
few little.
Okay, so are they all on board with this plan, and are you discussing this with them so that they're aware of what's happening?
Yes, we've discussed it with a number of people. Yeah, not everyone, but yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I guess we've started the engagement and we'll be continuing to talk to people along the journey. So, yeah.
Councillor Brown.
Thanks. Just a couple of questions. What is the engagement with iwi, which I think we've sort of talked about before, where, as I understand it, there would be at least two who'd be interested. There's this Mana Whenua group, or the sort of the sea people, but there's the
I think you're talking about the fisheries.
Are they part of this, or is this because it's on the land? This is more like the terrestrial.
Our representatives from Taranaki Wānui, I think they do. One of them happens to also be involved in the trust.
Both, right? But how kind of? I guess I was sort of slightly curious. So that's not a problem. You're saying that's okay, but how kind of integrated are we with them in terms of this process? Because obviously, if there was ever an example of where co-governance has got to really, walk and talk it, so to speak, this has got to be it. And so how much are we helping them to make sure that they get full participation, if you like?
Yeah, so we are working very closely with both iwis. We've been meeting with them regularly, and they're on the project steering group.
Yep.
And they've held a number of wānanga that, and they're planning to do more that will integrate more of Taranaki Wānui ideas and more of Ngāti Toa's on there. So, yeah. Oh, I just got a note here that said that our Ngāti Toa reps are also have the same fisheries people involved.
Oh, okay. Although is Ngāti Toa part of, because this isn't really their bit of coast, though, is it?
They do have.
Sorry about that.
They do have a statutory. Thing for the South Coast of Wellington.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought it was in Pororoa. But my other question is about the road reserves, and I get the point about roads, but obviously conversations I've been having with residents from Breaker Bay, it does seem that the council is very aware about sea incursion on roads, but not perhaps so much on the road reserves. And I mean, is that how does the sort of sea protection issue? I know that you've said that this doesn't include private property, but when it's council property in the form of road reserves as well as roads, how does that get factored into the equation?
It's something that we definitely need to through and work through on this plan, and specifically in the erosion around Breaker Bay. It's definitely. But it's not something I have a clear answer for you yet.
No, I don't expect a clear answer. But it does include the reserves as well as the roads that are sort of part of the mix, so to speak?
Yep.
Okay,
Yep.
great. No, thank you.
Cool. Councillor Pennant.
Thank you. Just wanting to continue on from Laurie's question. We do have a habit of writing really good plans and then gathering dust. So I guess maybe it's not for answering, but just we reflect as we go through another process, and then we find that we've got a zillion other projects to fund, and then we can't do this one, so that we, or you expect people to pay, really. So, I think we just, maybe it is something to reflect on about how we schedule all our policy reviews so that we can actually action the things that we have done.
Yeah, fair enough.
Councillor Free.
Yeah, I don't know if you'll be looking into, as part of the ecology, recent reports that dogs have been menacing penguins and killing penguins, and whether our dog laws are actually adequate around the coastal areas.
Yes, that's a big topic that's come through the public engagement feedback, and it's something that we are wanting to look at.
Yeah, thank you.
Cool. Thank you. There, we seem to have got through all the partai for that one. So on to section 2.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so yeah, just a brief overview of our public engagement. We've got about 3,016 pieces of individual feedback through our public engagement process. This included 8 in-person beachside chat events, which we worked with Massey University to create a cool model of Wellington's coast and took it out to the coast and talked to people there and got them to draw and interact. We ran a 4-week public engagement campaign online using a bunch of different engagement tools, including a put your thing on the map and ideas tool to add things. And we also did 3 community workshops, one with our recreational community, one with people living on the coast, and one big whole day workshop with environmental groups to talk about the coast. We got heaps and heaps of feedback from those groups. We also did a bunch of engagement in schools and got Enviro Schools to work with schools to get some feedback what children wanted aspired for the coast. And we also ran a research survey to get a more representative sample of how people were using the coast, and did some in-person targeted engagement discussions. So we really took quite a range of different approaches to get a range of different feedback from different people. And so that brought us to these 9 key themes for our engagement, and I'm now going to go through all those one by one, and then we're going to do a workshop activity around each of these feedback. So the first theme that people talked about was that, and there's a lot of information on these slides, but was that people love the coast for its scenic beauty, for the untouchedness, the serene and stunning nature of it. They love the wildness of going to Wellington's coast. But they raised issues with the design and maintenance. They were concerned about aesthetic appeal of structures like seawalls and fences, and that interacting with that, impacting on that nature and beauty feeling of the coast. They also were concerned about future development and harming on biodiversity. So there are a number of opportunities that people proposed around this, and one of them was ecological design, when we're thinking about using structures, limiting structures on the coast, and using nature-based solutions for seawalls. They also talked about cultural integration and having aesthetic consistency along the coast. The next big theme, which was, was ecosystems, wildlife and nature, and this is one of the biggest themes. People love going to the coast for the biodiversity and the wildlife there and that connection with nature, and this picture of these penguins is actually when I went out on a site visit in this area. We found these dead penguins there, so that was a moment. That was, sorry.
Oh, sorry, Ella, is your mic on? Might have just gone off.
Okay. Issues with stormwater pollution. One of the biggest issues was that people unhappy with this stormwater and wastewater that comes into our locations, into our coastal areas. Litter and rubbish, invasive species, but dogs and wildlife, as we mentioned before, and penguins and the protection of penguins was really high up there as an issue that people were talking about, as well as poaching in Te Kopaho and around the marine reserve. There were a number of opportunities, and this is just really quick, high-level, tackling invasive species. 75% of our threatened plants are in Wellington are coastal plants, so we mean really coastal plants. So there's opportunities around how we can protect them and how we can do more planting around them. more around protecting and enhancing natural habitats, whether it's dunes or coastal seeps, korora protection, talking about breeding times, can we make the korora the species that we highlight for protection, or can there be sanctuaries, ideas for stopping pollution, around sweeping streets and putting drain things in. How can we involve the community? Requests for more enforcement, signs, awareness, and a number of requests for enhanced monitoring. And I've sent round the engagement report that's got a bit more information there. So the third theme was climate change and resilience. So it was issues around, it's not a surprising one either. And people were concerned about the impacts of climate change on these areas. And there was also some preparation for natural disasters as a key issue. And this little graph on the side sort of shows what the most significant threats people identified were. Opportunities. People said nature-based solutions. They said let's look at how we can give more room for dunes. How can we work more with community around climate change? And there were a number of other solutions there, ideas. Access, parking and transport. I've got to do two at the same time. Access, parking and transport. People love the coast because it's really easy to access. It's really easy to get to. People did praise that there was convenient parking. There was a number of walkways and cycle pathways that were praised. But people did also bring out a number of issues with walkways in the area. A number of areas with paths are getting undermined, erosion, and the absence of walkways in some areas. They talked about parking issues, especially during summer peak times, the lack of public transport, tensions between user conflict and accessibility improvements for people, particularly with mobility disabilities. And there were a number of suggestions and specifically place-specific areas, opportunities that people talked about that we should improve. And I'm just going to jump to the next one. So the next key theme was culture and historical significance. So the coast is really valued for its cultural and historical significance for everyone and their identity that they feel connected to. But there were some issues. People thought there was a lack of recognition for, and specifically lack of recognition for Māori and lack of recognition for the historical significance in coastal areas. So there were opportunities around how could we do more heritage integration, educational programs and inclusion of Mātauranga, and recognise the role of mana whenua better. And then the next theme was around community and partnership. So people really loved how the community is involved in coastal stewardship and the number of volunteers that are working on restoration projects. People saw issues around limited resources and how can we continue to sustain engagement. People saw lots of opportunities around how can we work more with the community in a number of different ways to support outcomes. So, that's kind of that. And then theme 7 is around amenities and facilities. So there was, again, some positive feedback about many well-maintained toilets and changing rooms at popular locations. People had some appreciation for things like seats and picnic tables and playgrounds that we provide. But along with that, there were a lot of issues that people raised with different gaps in facilities and capacity issues in different spaces and wanting more and better repairs and better conditioned. People saw opportunities to fill those gaps, provide more shade and shelter. And then another key theme was around behaviour and safety. So people love the coast for its freedom and unregulated nature to just do what you want. And whether it's having a party or bonfire or making art. But with that comes a lot of issues around safety, theft, vandalism, graffiti, specifically around the Te Kaupōhau Reserve and the batch owners there, the harassment, and people were concerned about the lack of lighting in some areas, but that conflicts with the desire for dark areas to support stargazing and wildlife. Fire risk was another key theme, especially at Te Kaupōhau. So people came up with opportunities around enhancing security measures and asking for more ranger presence, more enforcement, enhanced lighting, and awareness around community engagement. And theme 9, coastal activities, kind of encompasses a million different things, different recreational codes, and what specifically the different recreation codes were asking for. So whether it's walking and running, which is about 50% of Wellingtonians apparently walk or run once or twice a week in our coastal areas in the summer, they're looking for better pathways, as I mentioned earlier, to swimming, which is growing, especially winter swimming, ocean swimming, which is growing as a bigger sport, and they're wanting for longer opening times for swimmers to, boating, sailing, wanting to do things with boat ramps, and to more commercial activities. And I'm just going to race to the last theme 10, which was financial concerns. So there were a number of submissions that also highlighted concerns over rates and the need for council to manage within a budget. So I just have to share all the themes. Okay, so that brings me to, before we move on to the workshop, does anyone have any patai?
Cool. Yep. Yeah, cool. We will try and keep these patai short, just because you'll be able to, more opportunity once we break out for workshops. So Councillor Chung.
Thanks very much for this. I can see that there's lots of contradictions here, because people who want the coastline to remain natural and sort of unsullied sort of thing, then those people who want actually public toilets or changing sheds and things. And so all of those things contradict each other, because if you start putting
Councillor
sort of
Chung,
man-made buildings
shape
in
it
there,
into a question, please.
yeah, so how are you going to manage that?
Yeah, so I think that is sort of what the task of the management plan is to do. People do want contradicting things, but like, how can we create those amenities so that they are climate safe and adaptable and protected from the environmental natures, and how do we balance those outcomes?
And located in the right place. You don't want toilets everywhere, but yeah.
Cool. Councillor Matthews.
I was just interested in the feedback about accessibility and mobility issues, and I just wondered if we had any indication that came from people who either were disabled themselves or the experience of a friend or family member, because I guess what I'm concerned that I have seen increasingly is use of that issue kind of third partying, when actually it's talking about my own experience as an able-bodied person not being able to access this by car. So I just wanted to check in whether there was any kind of qualitative kind of, or any kind of testing of that.
So yes, there was definitely some disability groups, for example, that submitted through the engagement process, and also through our coastal chats. We definitely spoke to some people in wheelchairs as well. So, there's a mix. But
wonderful, thank you.
Good. And I think, was it Councillor Pannett? Someone had their hand up. Yep.
Sorry, just going back to costs. I guess just how we're going to contain them with climate change. So we did some work, you may remember, around the Island Bay seawall, where we did the rebuilding of the wall versus a natural solution. The natural solution was much more expensive, but probably more effective. So I guess I'm just wondering where your thinking is with that, because, are we going to spend many, many millions of dollars protecting it and residential property and public infrastructure?
Well, I think that's all something we're going to be working through over a long time to figure out.
Yeah. It's a good question, and we've got to work through that as part of this project. Yeah.
Aye, very broad, very there's many sort of korora holes to dive down with this one. We've come to the end of the partai, so I'll hand over to Yao for describing the workshops, and I'm assuming councillors, you'll get more opportunities to ask more in-depth questions at the pages as well.
Yep. Yeah. Okay. So the first workshop activity purpose is to drill into some key engagement themes and to build on what we've heard. So we've got 5 questions up along the walls, one there. If you guys, council officers, could go stand next to your these guys are all going to come stand next to one and help facilitate questions, but you'll have 4 minutes to go stand next to one question. We've got one around climate change with Jamuna. We've got one around cultural heritage and identity with Bart. Parish will be talking about recreation activities over here, and Shona around the environmental questions. And Sherilyn is there talking about community stewardship and addressing issues around that. So if you could stand up, and we'll just have a bit of a rotation. So you go to one person and we have 4 to 5 minutes on that, and then we rotate to the next question. Can you guys make sure that you've got post-it notes to come and answer those questions? It'll be, and then we'll rotate to the next question. And then at the end, we'll have time for a reporting back session about what are the key themes that you guys discussed. So if you could.
Cool. And Alice, should we come back at like 25 past? Does that kind of suit if we're finishing the workshop all together by 4, enough time for both?
Yeah.
Or half past?
It'll be just 4 minutes, so 20, what's the time, sorry? Yeah, 25 past, yep.
Yeah, cool, sounds good.
Yeah.
See you all soon.
All right. running out, that the officers could just do a quick top of the things that were brought up by each of them before we move on to the next exercise. Sherilyn, can you go first?
So over here we have how can we support community stewardship and address issues related to behaviour. Others and leading by encouraging stewardship through education around community programs, e.g. beach cleaning. Social behaviour, and I guess there's a question around are there design solutions to help with that? No cars on beaches, stewardship appreciation through whose home it is, whether that be a penguin or a private resident or whoever. Better dog control rules to stop penguins being killed, having some areas off limits to dogs, or dogs must be muzzled with a big love heart there. Changing car park access at night, keep supporting the rangers in their community building, and maybe we have some sort of guidelines for safety in parks at night, you know, for example, people partying at raves or whatever. Yeah.
Cool, thank you, Sherilyn. Okay.
We had a few different themes. Shared transport networks, so footpaths and bus routes and cars and bikes and that kind of stuff. More changing facilities and toilets for the recreation use. What else do we have? Cycleways. More infrastructure for members of the public who have disability needs, so they can access the parks. Improvement with the track network as well, and also identifying known locations that we think there'll be points of contention around different wants and needs from the community groups.
Cool, thank you, Parrish. Shona? Oh, yeah.
Is that on? Yeah, okay. I'm at a bit of a distance from my poster, but I think the comments for the nature ecosystem one fell into three broad categories. First of all was nature first. Let's use that as our first filter when we're working around these coastal areas, and within that is protecting korora, and also looking at whether there is any room to make more space for nature by swapping land that's on the inside of the road round to the outside of the road and various things like that. There was another theme which was transport, and that was about the conflict in a way of there being so much of the coastal platform is occupied by road, which is great because that lets people in there. But if we're going to do that, we need to be able to accommodate them well, get good facilities, good parking, without sacrificing too much of that foreshore area. And definitely look at public transport and work with Greater Wellington Regional Council to get some decent services in there, including ferry service. And the third one was cross-council work, because some of those environmental issues go beyond what's within the scope of the Reserves Act on these particular reserve areas. So matters of pollution, for instance, and the infrastructure network, we have to work with the other departments across council.
Okay. Thank you, Shona. There's lots of things there. But, yeah, do you want to come speak?
As long as it's vaguely over a mic, sorry, Bark.
Oh, okay. I'll need to. I'll just. Okay, so. Okay, what we've got is lots of focus on history, of course, and oral histories, and how to cater for oral histories, and that could be through social media, QR codes, but then also in capturing that through signage and interpretations, and a focus on bilingual signage, and then also picture boards, and also comparing historical photos, paintings, etc., to modern images as well. And then all of the layers from whakapapa and cultural narratives, Māori cultural narratives, to Pākehā seafaring history as well, with an emphasis on the Italian community at Island Bay. And then from the idea of like providing more opportunities for fishing for the public, for example, Sea Tune and Miramar Wharves, and then also just the amazing opportunity that Te Kopo Reserve offers us as people of Pōneke, and also looking at the opportunities for iwi Māori in terms of job opportunities for the South Coast, whatever that might look like, but seeing that as an opportunity as well. Then building on the likes of the co-management arrangement that we have with Oruati, and wanting to see those sorts of things, or to build on those sorts of things. Then narratives around the Pacific navigators and the relationships with our neighbours in the Pacific Islands, and then more narratives around kupes navigations around the coasts as well, and then getting into rongoa Māori and maybe some interpretations or some sort of way to communicate the need to have some sort of some guidelines for people to know when to take and when not to take, etc., etc. And then looking at maybe the limited rubbish bins around the coast, and maybe using signage instead, by basically saying like take your rubbish home. The re-indigenizing of the place names of the coast, and then a personal want to from some of the people I talked to of some sort of expression, Māori expression on the coast, maybe a po, indicate so that people can understand or what whose takiwā they are arriving into, an expression of the mana o te whenua.
Cool.
Yeah, cool.
Lots there.
Yeah, there's lots. Oh, there was just one thing, was the way that stream planting groups and stream groups and things like that really help people to bond through community spirit. Yeah.
Cool, thank you, Pat.
Yep, and I was looking after the theme that was about climate change and resilience and what that could mean for coastal parks, beaches and reserves. Lots of really great ideas. Some of the themes that came up were around supporting a Te Ao Māori approach to thinking about climate change and resilience responses. There was a really helpful suggestion to think about the framing of how we think about our response to climate change, and to ensure that there is focus on the emissions reduction, slowing down the climate change issue. There were also lots of support for engaging our community around these topics. Support for ongoing deep engagement, for supporting local communities to be part of this, and encouragement to make the way that we communicate or educate about these topics relevant to people's lives in the coastal context. There were quite a few examples of ideas around supporting existing projects like dune restoration, projects like Love Rimu Rimu, so community groups who are already leading a lot of really positive action in the coastal environment that also have benefits to, I guess, some of the other themes that have come up as well. There were quite a few different ideas around different adaptation approaches that could be taken, so a lot of support for nature-based solutions. There were some conversations about managed retreat and how this plan could help, I guess, to start thinking about our public assets and how managed retreat planning might need to be part of that. So starting to think about things like coastal roads and what might happen over, say, the next 30 to 100 years. Some ideas around doing further analysis to support that process, so exploring what the costs for our repairs and maintenance is at the moment, as an example. And another idea around ensuring that the planning process has, say, the annual plan process in mind, and that we're focusing on fundable ideas as part of the process.
Awesome, thank you, Jamuna. So from that, I think we'll get all those notes written up and think about how we can include them all in shaping this plan. I'm going to move us now to think more about specific locations. So we've been focusing on the big, broad key themes. Now, through the engagement report, we also got key themes by area. Now, this has got way too much information on it, but so I'm not expecting you to be across all that, but you'll have the slide pack if you want to have a look at it later. Before I move into, I'll just talk quickly one or two key themes that came up by area. Te Kaupōhau there's a lot of stuff about four-wheel drive access. There's a huge thing around the issues that four-wheel drive has in coastal management. There were concerns around poaching and freedom camping. In Southern Bays, one of the biggest issues was around resilience, erosion, emergency preparedness, and around dune protection and dune expansion, and also around amenities for swimming, diving, surfing. At Lyell Bay, the biggest issues were around coastal resilience and the dunes and the impact of potential airport expansion and surfing facilities. And in all of these themes, there were topics around korora and dog management. In the Rangitato, Takiwa, environmental and wildlife protection was a big one, so was historical and cultural significance awareness. And in the Eastern Bays, people really focused around amenity improvements for toilets, changing rooms, concerns about the Seatoon Beach, sand movement, and Wersa Bay dunes. In Mātai Moana, the biggest theme, and this was a really big theme for the whole management plan engagement, was around more pedestrian-friendly options for the coastal road between Scorching Bay and Shelley Bay, and better track connections. There was, in Akutangi area, there was a lot of stuff around cyclists and pedestrian safety and the intentions there, and around penguin protection. And in Oriental Bay, again, about managing the tensions between cyclists, pedestrians and scooters, and also fixing the band rotunda and improving swimming facilities. And there's also a million other things and ideas that people raised, but those are kind of the top things. So the next task now is we're going to look at issues and opportunities on a map. So I'm hoping that you guys can put those maps out in different locations, and the idea is to drill into specific coastal locations and to understand from you guys' perspective what the issues and opportunities we need to consider at a location level in developing this plan. So we're breaking the table into maybe 3 groups, and if you could hover around or you can get a seat and hover around one of the maps. And so if you use the yellow post-its to talk about opportunities or ideas in specific locations you have to improve these areas, and in the pink, and use pink to talk about issues and challenges or threats we need to consider, and you use the post-it notes to place it on the specific area that's related. Please write your insights down and be location specific where you can. There's a map there, and one over there. And so, yeah, you've got 10 to 15 minutes to focus on.
Yeah, try be effective with your communication as well. So just chuck stuff down on the post-it notes so we can get more feedback. Thanks, Ella. Brown, thank you. Councillor Free, Deputy Mayor Foon.
Exciting.
Thank you, everyone. Hi.
Oh, can you put that up so I can see? Oh, no, I can see. Does it?
Cool. Okay, Menas, we have about. I need the bell. I need the bell. Thank you, everyone. All right, team, we have about 4 minutes till we jump into another hour-long workshop. Oh, thanks, Alexi. Cheers. Okay. All right. We've only got a few minutes till we jump into another hour-long workshop, so I'm going to hand it over to Ella to summarise and talk about next steps.
All right, thank you, Terry. Yeah, I'll just take a minute and then you guys can have a break. So just letting you know that we'll write up all this information and I'll send it around to you guys to see if you're happy and to make sure that we've understood what you've said. And you can then provide more input or feedback in response to that. So yeah, that's what will happen with this feedback. This is what's happening next. We're going to develop the draft plan. It takes into account all this information as well as some environmental mapping, some coastal hazard mapping, and we'll plan to bring the draft back to you guys in March. If you have any more questions, you can email me and Sherilyn, and we can continue to discuss things. But that's the plan.
Kia ora. Big thank you for all your mahi. Really appreciate it, and thanks so much for everyone jumping in on discussions and helping to facilitate these ideas. It was a really good workshop. Oh, Mike.
Nice.
Kia ora.
Just looking at the timeline in relation to the annual plan, it looks like the recommendations might miss the next one. Is that correct?
Yes. Yep, I think that's correct.
Okay.
Yeah. Timing is tricky. And there's, we'll just have to fold it into the next appropriate process that we have, depending on when we're able to land it. Yep.
Yep.
Aye, big ambitious work program. Okay, thanks everybody. We'll give us a few minutes to set up for the next one. See you shortly.